I want at least 5 children. And the Apache woman changed the lonely cowboy's life. Forever Ethan had lived on the ranch for as long as he could remember. The land stretched far and wide, rolling hills fading into distant mountains, and a sky so big it seemed to swallow everything beneath it. Every morning, he woke before the sun, the cold air biting at his skin as he stepped outside his small wooden cabin. He would look around at the quiet ranch, the fences, the cattle, and the empty fields, feeling the weight of silence pressing down on him. There was beauty in the land, no doubt, wildflowers in the spring, golden grass in the summer, but there was also a loneliness that he could never escape. Ethan's days followed a simple, repetitive pattern. He fed the cattle, repaired broken fences, rode out to check the distant pastures, and tended to the barn. Every action required work, and every workday blended into the next. Some might have found comfort in the routine, but for Ethan, it was a reminder of how solitary his life had become. Even when the sun painted the sky in brilliant oranges and reds at sunset, there was no one to admire it with him, no laughter to fill the air, only the wind whistling through the trees and the distant calls of birds. He often remembered what life had been like when he was younger. There had been neighbors, a few friends who would ride with him on weekends, and even family who visited occasionally. But one by one, the people he knew moved away, passed on, or grew too busy with their own lives to visit. Ethan stayed, tied to the land and the promise he had made to himself that he would continue the ranch. Over the years, the silence had become a constant companion, a shadow that followed him everywhere. Despite the isolation, Ethan had dreams. He imagined a home filled with warmth, laughter, and the noise of a family. He thought about children running around the yard, their voices blending with the sounds of the animals, their curiosity and energy bringing life to the quiet ranch. He imagined evenings spent around a fire, sharing stories, hearing the small joys and worries of little ones, and feeling a sense of connection he had never truly known. But these dreams were often pushed aside when the reality of his life set in. Work, bills, and the day-to-day demands of the ranch left little room for imagining a future that seemed so distant and impossible. Winter was the hardest time for Ethan. Snow would blanket the fields, turning the world into a white, endless expanse. The wind would howl through the cracks in the cabin, rattling the windows and chilling him to the bone. Nights were long and quiet, the only light coming from the fireplace he kept burning to stave off the cold. During those nights, Ethan's loneliness felt heavier, more tangible. He would sit in his worn rocking chair, staring into the flames, thinking about how different his life could have been. He often wondered if he would ever meet someone who could share this life with him, someone who would care for him, and someone whose presence would fill the emptiness that had settled in his heart over the years. Ethan's friends, though few, occasionally reached out, calling him to check in or inviting him to town events. But he rarely accepted. The thought of leaving his ranch, even for a short while, was uncomfortable. The land was his life, and stepping away from it, even for a day, left him feeling restless and uneasy. And so the days passed. Sunrises and sunsets marked the rhythm of his life, and he grew accustomed to the quiet, finding solace in small moments. The sound of the wind, the smell of fresh hay, the way his horse nickered when he approached the stable. Even though he appeared strong and self-sufficient to others, Ethan had a gentle side that few saw. He cared deeply for his animals, speaking to them softly, patting their flanks, and ensuring they were fed and healthy. He tended the small garden behind his cabin with careful attention, growing vegetables and herbs to supplement his meals. There was a sense of nurturing in these actions, a desire to care for living things, even if there was no human presence to share it with. His kindness extended to the land itself. He respected the soil, the water, and the animals, treating the ranch not just as property, but as a living part of his life. Yet in the stillness of the evenings, the quiet moments before sleep, Ethan's mind always drifted back to the dreams of family and companionship. He thought about how different his life would be with someone beside him, sharing chores, stories, and laughter. The idea of a partner, someone who understood him and accepted the life he led, seemed almost unreachable. Still, he clung to the hope, hidden deep inside, that one day someone might appear, someone who could change everything. He often walked along the edges of the ranch, where the grass met the horizon, and imagined the life he longed for. Children playing in the fields, a partner's hand in his, evenings spent talking about the day's work, and mornings waking up together to the first light of dawn. These thoughts brought him both comfort and sadness. Comfort because he could still dream, sadness because the reality seemed so far away. But even in his solitude, Ethan remained patient. He knew life could be unpredictable. Sometimes the smallest events could change the course of everything. As another cold night settled over the ranch, Ethan stoked the fire, feeling the warmth creep into his bones. He looked out the window at the vast land, blanketed in stars, and whispered to himself that he would keep dreaming. He would continue his work, care for his land and animals, and wait for the day when his life might change. Perhaps that day was far off, perhaps it was near. He didn't know, but deep inside, a quiet hope lingered like a small flame in the dark, refusing to go out. And so the lonely cowboy continued his life, tending his ranch, riding the open fields, and holding on to dreams that had sustained him for years. The wind might howl, the nights might be long, and the land might seem empty at times. But in his heart, Ethan carried a belief that one day someone would come and fill his life with love, laughter, and family. Until that day, he remained steady, patient, and strong, knowing that his story was far from over. One bright spring morning, Ethan saddled his horse and set out for the nearby town. The sun was just rising, painting the sky with soft shades of orange and pink. Birds chirped in the trees, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of fresh grass and wildflowers. Although he had traveled this road countless times, today he felt a strange sense of anticipation, though he didn't know why. The road was quiet, and the world seemed peaceful, as if the land itself had paused to watch him pass. As he rode into town, Ethan noticed a small crowd gathered near the market. He slowed his horse, curious, and saw a woman among them he had never seen before. She had a presence that seemed to draw attention effortlessly. Her dark hair fell over her shoulders, and her eyes sparkled with life and confidence. She was arranging colorful handmade crafts on a small wooden table, each piece carefully displayed as if telling a story of its own. The patterns were intricate, each bead and thread placed with care. Ethan felt an unfamiliar stir in his chest. There was something about her, something he couldn't quite name, that felt different from anyone he had met before. The woman's name was Ailn. She belonged to the Apache community and had traveled to town to sell her crafts and share her culture with others. Her smile was warm, and she spoke with a voice that carried both strength and gentleness. People stopped by to admire her work, and she answered their questions patiently, always with kindness. Ethan approached slowly, unsure what to say. He had always been quiet around strangers, especially women, but something about Ailn made him want to speak, to introduce himself, and to hear her voice. Finally, gathering his courage, Ethan spoke. "Those are beautiful," he said, pointing to a carefully beaded necklace. Ailn looked up, her eyes meeting his, and smiled. "Thank you," she replied. "Each piece tells a story. The patterns, the colors, they are all meaningful." Ethan was struck not just by the beauty of her words, but by the depth behind them. She didn't just sell crafts. She shared a part of herself, her history, and her dreams. They began talking, and the conversation flowed more easily than Ethan had expected. He told her about the ranch, the wide-open fields, the animals, and the long, quiet days. Ailn listened intently, nodding and asking questions that made him feel seen, as if someone truly understood his life and the loneliness he carried. She spoke of her own life too, of her family, her community, and the hopes she held for the future. There was a balance in their conversation, a give and take that felt natural and comforting. For the first time in years, Ethan felt that spark of connection he had only dreamed of. Days passed, and Ethan found reasons to return to town more often. Sometimes it was to check supplies, other times it was to see Ailn and talk to her. She would laugh at his quiet jokes, teach him about the meanings behind her crafts, and share stories of her childhood and traditions. Each meeting brought them closer, and Ethan realized that he looked forward to seeing her more than anything else. He felt a warmth in his chest, a feeling of hope that he hadn't known in years. Ailn, too, seemed drawn to Ethan. She admired his quiet strength, his dedication to the ranch, and the gentle way he treated the animals. She saw the loneliness in his eyes, but also the kindness and patience he carried deep within him. Their bond grew slowly, naturally, like a plant reaching for sunlight. They spent hours talking about life, sharing stories, and dreaming aloud. She taught him about the Apache ways, how each craft, each tradition had a story and a purpose. He taught her about ranch life, the routines, the work, and the rhythm of life in the wide-open plains. In each other, they found someone who understood the other's world and respected it. One afternoon, Aelin agreed to visit the ranch. Ethan rode out to meet her at the edge of the property, his heart pounding with a mix of excitement and nervousness. He wanted everything to be perfect, yet he feared that the silence of the ranch might be intimidating or dull compared to the lively town. But as she stepped off her horse, carrying a small basket of handmade crafts, her eyes lit up at the sight of the wide fields and the animals grazing peacefully. She breathed in the fresh air and smiled. "This place is beautiful," she said. "I can feel the life in it." Together, they walked the ranch. Ethan showed her the barn, the pasture, and the small garden behind the cabin. He explained the routines of ranch life, the feeding schedules, the chores, and the ways he cared for the animals. Aeon listened attentively, asking questions and offering suggestions. She even helped him feed the animals, her laughter filling the quiet spaces that had always been so still. Ethan felt a joy he hadn't known for a long time. For years, the ranch had been silent, but now it felt alive in a new way, filled with energy, laughter, and the possibility of companionship. As the sun began to set, they sat on a small wooden fence, watching the sky turn shades of pink and gold. Ethan felt an unfamiliar boldness and spoke of his life, of the loneliness he had endured, and the dreams he had quietly carried in his heart. Aeon listened carefully, her hand brushing against his, and he felt a connection so deep it left him momentarily breathless. She spoke about her own dreams, about family, about sharing love, about a life filled with children and joy. Ethan felt a mix of awe and wonder. He had imagined a family before, but he had never spoken it aloud, never dared hope that it could truly happen. Their time together deepened day by day. They rode horses, tended the garden, and cooked simple meals in the small kitchen of the cabin. Each moment revealed new facets of their personalities. Ethan discovered that Aeon had a gentle humor that could make even the dullest task feel joyful. Aeon realized that Ethan's quiet strength was the foundation of someone who could be trusted, loved, and relied upon. They were learning each other's worlds, blending traditions and routines, and slowly building a life together, even before any formal commitment. Ethan began to feel hope bloom within him, a fragile but growing belief that his life was about to change in ways he had never imagined. He noticed that his long, lonely evenings no longer felt so heavy. The wind still howled outside the cabin, but now there was a presence to imagine sharing it with. Nights were no longer completely silent. Even when Aeon was in town, he could feel the memory of her laughter and warmth, filling the room with an invisible light. Meanwhile, Aeon also felt the pull of something rare and extraordinary. The ranch, the wide-open plains, and the simple, honest life that Ethan led had a purity she found hard to resist. She had met many people in her travels, but Ethan's life and character were different. There was no pretense, no rush, no distraction. Only sincerity, care, and a steady patience that made her feel safe and understood. She realized that she wanted to be part of this life, to bring her own dreams into the world he had built. Their growing friendship, built on trust, respect, and quiet affection, began to take on a new dimension. They laughed together, shared stories that had never been told to anyone else, and found comfort in each other's company. Ethan realized that he was no longer imagining what it would be like to have someone beside him. He was living it. And Aeon, who had once only come to town to sell her crafts, found herself staying longer and longer on the ranch, drawn to the peacefulness, the open sky, and the man who had captured her heart without even trying. It was clear to both of them that something significant was forming. The connection between Ethan and Aeon was not sudden or fleeting. It was built on shared experiences, mutual respect, and a gentle unfolding of trust and understanding. The quiet cowboy and the vibrant Apache woman had found in each other something that neither had expected: a companion, a friend, and the possibility of love. By the end of the spring, Ethan knew that his life was beginning to change. What had been an endless expanse of quiet and solitude was now filled with laughter, conversation, and a warmth he had longed for. Aeon had brought not just her presence, but her spirit, her stories, and her dreams into the ranch. And though neither of them could predict what the future held, they both felt a certainty that life together could be extraordinary, full of hope, joy, and the possibility of a family that would fill the silent ranch with life once again. Spring had fully settled on the ranch, painting the fields in rich green and golden sunlight. Flowers bloomed along the fences, and the wind carried the sweet scent of fresh grass mixed with wildflowers. Ethan felt a change in the air, when he couldn't quite explain at first. It wasn't just the beauty of the season. It was the presence of Aelin, who had begun spending more and more time at the ranch. Her laughter echoed through the barn, and her gentle voice filled spaces that had been silent for years. Ethan realized, almost reluctantly, that his heart had begun to change, just as his life had. One warm evening, they sat together on the porch of the cabin, sipping tea and watching the sun dip toward the horizon. The sky was a masterpiece of orange, pink, and purple, and the world seemed to pause in that perfect moment. Aelin leaned back against the railing, her eyes following the flight of a bird across the sky. Ethan glanced at her, feeling a strange mix of nervousness and courage. He had loved the quiet of the ranch for so long, but now, in her presence, he felt a warmth he had never known. Aelin turned to him, her eyes sparkling with an intensity that made his chest tighten. "Ethan," she began softly, "I have to tell you something." Her voice was calm, but there was a determination behind it that made him pay full attention. Ethan nodded, encouraging her to continue. He had learned to listen carefully to her words, knowing that they always carried meaning. "I want at least 5 children," she said. The words hung in the air, and for a moment, Ethan was silent. He had never heard someone say something so bold and certain, so full of hope and intention. He blinked, unsure how to respond at first. 5 children, it was more than he had ever imagined for himself. Yet hearing her say it aloud stirred something deep inside him. He felt a spark of possibility, a dream he had held in secret finally voiced and given life. Ethan swallowed, feeling a rush of emotion. 5 children? He repeated, his voice low, almost in disbelief. Aelin nodded, smiling gently. "Yes," she said. "I know it's a lot, but it's my dream. I want a family full of life and love, children running and laughing, filling the house with joy. I want a home like that." Her words painted a picture so vivid, so alive, that Ethan could almost see it. A house brimming with children's laughter, little hands running across the floor, and the warmth of family surrounding him in ways he had only imagined in quiet moments. For a long while, Ethan didn't speak. He felt a mixture of surprise, awe, and a deep stirring of hope. He had always thought about having a family, but the thought had been buried under years of loneliness, routine, and the quiet acceptance of a solitary life. Now, hearing Aelin speak so openly and confidently, he realized that dreams he had kept secret for years could be real. He could build a life filled with love, laughter, and children who would bring meaning to every corner of his ranch. Aelin reached out and took his hand in hers, her touch warm and grounding. "Ethan," she said softly, "I don't just want children. I want a life with someone who cares, who loves, and who is ready to build something together. I see that in you. I see your heart, and I know you are capable of love, even if you don't always say it aloud." Her words cut through the years of solitude that had surrounded him. She saw him, not just the quiet cowboy, not just the man who worked tirelessly on the ranch, but the man who longed for connection, for family, for love. Ethan felt a tear form in his eye, though he quickly brushed it away. I don't know what to say," he admitted, his voice thick with emotion. "I've dreamed of a family for so long, but I never thought it could actually happen." Aelin smiled, squeezing his hand gently. "It can," she said. "We can make it happen together." From that evening on, a new chapter began in their lives. The bond between Ethan and Aelin deepened, no longer just friendship or shared curiosity, but something stronger, more profound. They began spending more time together on the ranch, sharing chores, cooking meals, and planning for a future neither of them had dared imagine before. Every moment was filled with connection, small gestures, quiet conversations, and laughter that echoed through the open fields. They worked side by side in the garden, planting vegetables and herbs, discussing what they might grow for a family that would one day eat from it. Ethan taught Aelin how to ride the horses across the fields, and she shared stories of her childhood, her heritage, and the lessons she had learned from her community. They discovered in each other a balance of strength and gentleness, a way to support and care without forcing or demanding. Each day brought them closer, weaving a tapestry of trust and affection that neither had anticipated but both welcomed wholeheartedly. One afternoon, while tending the cattle together, Aelin spoke again of her dream. "I imagine a house full of children," she said, watching a foal run across the pasture. I imagine them growing up surrounded by love, learning from both of us, carrying on what we care about, and creating their own stories. I want a family that is strong, kind, and full of laughter. Ethan listened, feeling his heart swell. He began to imagine it vividly. Little feet racing across the barn, children helping feed the animals, their voices rising with excitement and curiosity. The ranch, once silent and solitary, could be filled with life, noise, and joy. Ethan realized that Aelin had not just changed his life with her presence, but she had awakened dreams he had almost forgotten. She brought courage into his heart, the courage to hope, to plan, to envision a future he had long thought impossible. Her words were not just words. They were a challenge and a gift, urging him to step into a life he had been too cautious to claim. They began discussing practical matters, too: how to prepare the ranch for a growing family, how to plan for the responsibilities of children, and how to blend their worlds and traditions. It wasn't all easy. Sometimes Ethan worried about the future, about whether he could provide and care for so many children. But Aelin's confidence and determination were contagious. She believed in him, in their shared vision, and in the possibility of a life full of love. With her by his side, he felt capable of anything. Evenings on the porch became their favorite time. They would sit together as the sky turned shades of pink, orange, and deep purple, dreaming aloud about their future. Aelin would speak of the first child, of the little joys and challenges, and Ethan would imagine himself holding a baby in his arms, hearing laughter fill the cabin. They laughed at their plans, debated names, and shared fears, always returning to the certainty that together, they could build the family they both longed for. One night, after a long day of work and laughter, Aelin leaned against Ethan and whispered, "I believe this is the beginning of something beautiful. You and me, this ranch, a family, it's all possible." Ethan held her close, feeling the warmth and truth of her words. In that moment, he understood that love was not just a feeling. It was action, dedication, and courage. He had spent so many years waiting, and now, finally, he had someone who would walk beside him, dream beside him, and help him create the life he had only imagined in the quiet of lonely nights. With Aelin, every day became brighter. The ranch, once a place of solitude, now held laughter, conversation, and the beginnings of hope. They planned, worked, and dreamed together, knowing that the challenges ahead would be easier because they faced them as a team. Each shared moment, each touch, each laugh, was a building block in a life that neither had thought possible. A life full of love, family, and the promise of children who would one day run across the fields they both cherished. Ethan realized something profound. He had not just fallen in love with Aelin, he had fallen in love with the life they could create together. Her bold declaration of wanting 5 children had not frightened him. It had awakened something he had long buried. He now believed that dreams, even the boldest ones, could become reality when shared with the right person. And as they sat together under the stars, planning, dreaming, and holding on to each other, Ethan understood that his lonely days were over. A new life had begun, one full of hope, love, and the endless possibilities that only family could bring. Life on the ranch had begun to change in ways Ethan had never imagined. With Aelin by his side, the days were filled with laughter, conversation, and warmth. Yet as much as their love had blossomed, challenges soon appeared, small at first, almost unnoticeable, but gradually testing the strength of their bond. Living together was not only about shared dreams and laughter. It was about learning to understand and adapt to one another's worlds, habits, and ways of thinking. Ethan had spent years accustomed to a quiet routine. Every morning began at dawn with chores, feeding the cattle, mending fences, and tending the garden. Everything was orderly and predictable. Aelin, however, brought a vibrant energy that sometimes clashed with his careful rhythm. She wanted to explore new ways of doing things, rearrange the garden, and introduce her own traditions into the daily life of the ranch. At first, Ethan felt hesitant. He was used to doing things a certain way and struggled to accept changes, even small ones. Yet he loved her presence too much to resist. He began to realize that love was not about control. It was about compromise, patience, and learning together. One afternoon, as they worked together feeding the animals, Aelin suggested a new routine for the day. "Let's try feeding the calves in the morning and the horses later," she said brightly. Ethan paused, unsure at first. "But I've always done it this way," he replied. She smiled softly. "I know, but let's just try it. Sometimes change can be good." Reluctantly, Ethan agreed. By the end of the day, he found that her suggestion made the chores easier and even more enjoyable. He realized that Aelon's ideas were not just different, they were thoughtful, coming from a desire to improve their shared life. Despite these small victories, life outside the ranch sometimes presented more serious challenges. Some townspeople whispered about their union. A few looked at Aelon's heritage with suspicion or misunderstanding, and Ethan occasionally overheard remarks that made him uncomfortable. There were those who believed that a cowboy like him should only follow tradition, that his life was too settled to include someone so different. At first, Ethan felt anger and frustration. He had worked hard to build his life, and he didn't understand why others' opinions should matter. But Aelon reminded him gently that love was about what they shared, not what others thought. She taught him that courage was not just in facing hard work, but in standing together, hand in hand, in the face of judgment. Financial challenges also began to surface. Raising a family, especially one as large as Aelon dreamed of, would require planning and resources. The ranch had always sustained Ethan comfortably, but now he began to consider how they would manage expenses, plan for the children, and ensure the land could support them all. Aelon, with her calm confidence, worked alongside him. They discussed budgets, ways to improve the garden for more food, and ways to sell some of her crafts to supplement the income. They planned together, learning that building a future was as much about teamwork as love. Cultural differences were another area they had to navigate. Aelon brought stories, traditions, and practices from her Apache heritage, rituals, crafts, and ways of understanding the world that were new to Ethan. At first, he found it difficult to understand some of her customs, and occasionally, his practical, ranch-focused perspective clashed with her spiritual and cultural approach. But Aelon never forced her ways on him. She invited him to participate, to ask questions, and to learn at his own pace. Slowly, Ethan began to see the beauty and wisdom in her traditions, realizing that embracing them enriched their shared life rather than complicating it. They learned from each other in countless ways. Ethan taught Aelon about the land, how to read the weather, the patterns of the cattle, and the needs of the animals. He showed her how to repair fences, mend tools, and plant seeds in a way that would yield the best harvest. Aelon, in turn, taught Ethan patience and mindfulness, showing him how to see meaning in small details, how to value heritage, and how to find joy in stories and rituals. Each lesson strengthened their bond, weaving their worlds together into a tapestry of love, respect, and shared growth. The days were long and sometimes exhausting, but each challenge they faced brought them closer. During storms, they worked together to secure the barn, comforted the animals, and supported each other when the wind and rain felt relentless. When the work was done, they would sit by the fire, exhausted but smiling, knowing that facing hardships together made them stronger. Ethan realized that life with Aelon was not just about romance or dreams. It was about resilience, partnership, and building something lasting. Their communication became the foundation of their relationship. They learned to speak openly about their fears, hopes, and mistakes. Sometimes arguments arose, over chores, schedules, or differing opinions, but they approached each disagreement with respect. Aelon's calm reasoning and Ethan's quiet patience allowed them to find solutions without bitterness. Each resolved argument became a lesson, teaching them that love was not only about affection, but about understanding, compromise, and the willingness to see through the other's eyes. Even as they faced difficulties, moments of joy and intimacy continued to flourish. They celebrated small victories, like a calf born healthy or a garden flourishing beyond expectations. They laughed together over mishaps, like a spilled basket of vegetables or a playful horse refusing to cooperate. Each shared experience, whether challenging or joyful, added depth to their relationship. Ethan began to see that love was not always perfect or effortless. It required effort, trust, and patience, but the rewards were immeasurable. As the seasons changed, so did their understanding of each other. Winter brought long nights by the fire, giving them time to share stories, read letters, and plan for their future family. Spring brought growth, not only in the fields but in their hearts. Summer brought the promise of warmth and long days to work together. Autumn painted the ranch in colors of gold and red, reminding them of the cycles of life, of growth, and of the beauty of facing challenges hand in hand. Through all these experiences, Ethan saw the depth of Aelon's strength. She was not only vibrant and full of life, but resilient and wise. Her presence helped him confront fears he had buried long ago, the fear of failure, of loneliness, and of being unable to provide a family. With her, he discovered courage he hadn't known he possessed. Aeon, too, learned from Ethan. She discovered that love could be steady and quiet. That strength came not only from bold action, but from dedication, reliability, and care. Together, they balanced each other perfectly, forming a partnership built on respect, love, and mutual growth. By the time their love had deepened fully, Ethan understood that challenges would continue, but he no longer feared them. He realized that the difficulties they faced were not obstacles to their happiness, but opportunities to grow together. Each hardship tested their patience, compassion, and commitment, but each one also strengthened the bond between them. He now knew that love was not simply about romance. It was about building a life together, facing hardships, and celebrating triumphs as a team. Even the ranch itself seemed to change with their presence. What was once a quiet, solitary land now carried the echoes of laughter, conversation, and shared effort. Each day, as Ethan worked alongside Aeon, he felt a sense of fulfillment he had never known. The ranch was no longer just a place of work. It was home, alive with the promise of family, love, and the life they were creating together. Ethan and Aeon began to imagine the future more vividly. They talked about the children they would one day have, planning for rooms, chores, and lessons. They envisioned teaching them the ways of both their worlds, ranch life and Apache heritage, so that their children would grow up strong, wise, and compassionate. These plans, once distant dreams, now felt tangible. Each discussion brought them closer, not only as lovers, but as partners preparing to build a family and a life together. In the quiet of the evening, as they sat under the stars, Ethan reflected on the journey they had taken. The challenges had been many: cultural differences, opinions of others, financial concerns, and the simple difficulty of blending two lives. But they had faced each one together. And through it all, their love had only grown stronger. He realized that life was not perfect, but it was beautiful, especially when shared with someone who truly understood, supported, and loved him. Aeon rested her head on Ethan's shoulder, and he held her close, feeling the warmth and certainty that had been missing from his life for so many years. Together, they had learned that challenges were not threats but lessons, that love was not only passion but dedication, and that family was built not just from blood, but from trust, respect, and shared dreams. The once lonely cowboy and the vibrant Apache woman had grown together, learning, adapting, and thriving in ways that neither could have imagined alone. And so, life continued on the ranch, each day filled with work, laughter, learning, and love. The challenges they faced were real, but so was the joy of overcoming them together. They had begun to build a home that would one day be filled with children, with memories, and with a love that could withstand the tests of time. Ethan realized that with Aeon, he was not just living. He was truly alive, ready to embrace the family, the future, and the endless possibilities that awaited them. The years that followed brought life and laughter to the ranch in ways Ethan had never imagined. The quiet days he had once known were replaced with the sound of tiny footsteps, giggles, and the cheerful chaos of children growing up surrounded by love. Aeon's dream of having at least 5 children became a reality, and the ranch, which had once been a place of solitude, now thrummed with life, energy, and purpose. Every corner of the home, every field, every barn echoed with the sounds of a family building a life together. Ethan watched, often in awe, as Aeon moved gracefully through the chaos of daily life. She tended to the children with patience, warmth, and a radiant joy that seemed endless. From sunrise until well past sunset, she was a guiding presence, feeding, teaching, and playing with the children, while also helping Ethan with the daily work on the ranch. She had a way of balancing the practical and the magical, the ordinary and the extraordinary, showing Ethan that love was not just a feeling but a living, breathing part of every day. The children grew quickly. The eldest, a bright, curious girl named Leela, often helped Aeon in the garden, learning the care of plants and the traditions of her Apache heritage. She listened intently to Aeon's stories, wide-eyed as her mother spoke of family, courage, and the ways of their people. The second, a boy named Caleb, had Ethan's quiet strength and determination, following his father into the fields, learning to care for the animals and understand the rhythms of ranch life. The younger children, too, brought their own personalities, creating a dynamic household filled with laughter, small arguments, play, and discovery. Ethan sometimes found himself standing at the edge of the fields, watching the children run and play, and feeling a deep sense of gratitude. Years of loneliness had taught him patience, but nothing had prepared him for the joy of witnessing a family grow, seeing little lives flourish under the care of someone he loved so deeply. Every laugh, every hug, every question asked in wonder filled a place in his heart that he had thought would remain empty forever. The ranch was alive in a way that transcended the work and routines. It was alive with love, connection, and the stories of 5 children learning and exploring the world. Life was not without challenges, of course. Raising 5 children required constant attention, planning, and teamwork. Ethan and Ailn often stayed up late, discussing school, chores, and plans for the coming seasons. They coordinated feeding schedules, bedtime routines, and lessons about respect, kindness, and responsibility. There were moments of frustration, spilled milk, broken toys, arguments between siblings, but these were outweighed by moments of joy, laughter, and pride. Each challenge was a lesson, teaching both parents patience, resilience, and the incredible strength of family bonds. The ranch itself reflected the growing family. The barn was filled with animals cared for by little hands under watchful eyes. The garden flourished with vegetables, herbs, and flowers tended by both Ailn and Leela, while Caleb learned to repair tools and ride the horses, sometimes accompanied by his younger siblings. The house was filled with the sounds of mealtimes, bedtime stories, and the quiet hum of daily life, each room holding the warmth of shared experiences, accomplishments, and love. Ethan often marveled at how different the ranch had become, once a quiet, solitary place, now a living, breathing home filled with laughter and learning. Ailn continued to inspire and guide not just the children but Ethan himself. She encouraged him to embrace fatherhood fully, to see the beauty in the small moments, and to participate actively in the children's lives. Ethan found that he loved bedtime stories as much as any child, reading aloud with passion, teaching lessons about honesty, courage, and the ways of the land. He shared his experiences, told stories of the ranch, and offered wisdom drawn from years of solitude and hard work. Together, Ethan and Ailn created a home where the children felt loved, supported, and safe, a place where dreams could grow alongside responsibilities, and where the values of both parents could blend harmoniously. The community began to notice the changes, too. People who once whispered about their union now admired the family they had created. Neighbors would occasionally visit, offering congratulations, gifts, or simply spending time with the children. Some sought advice from Ethan on ranch work, while others asked Ailn about her crafts or the traditions she taught the children. Slowly, the couple realized that the quiet whispers of judgment had been replaced by recognition and respect. Their family was no longer just a dream. It was a living testament to love, resilience, and dedication. The children thrived in both worlds their parents offered. Ailn ensured that they learned about Apache heritage, traditions, and stories, instilling a deep sense of pride and identity. She taught them the meaning of the crafts she had once sold in town, the wisdom of the elders, and the values of courage, respect, and community. Ethan taught them the ways of the ranch, the care of the animals, the importance of hard work, and the lessons hidden in the cycles of nature. Together, they created children who were both grounded and imaginative, strong and compassionate, connected to the land and to the stories of their ancestors. Family celebrations became cherished traditions. Birthdays, harvests, and simple Sunday meals were occasions for togetherness, laughter, and reflection. The children learned to work together, help one another, and understand the importance of kindness and respect. Ailn and Ethan found joy not just in parenting, but in seeing the children grow into thoughtful, capable individuals. The ranch, once a symbol of Ethan's solitude, had transformed into a haven of love, learning, and life. Ethan often reflected on how much his life had changed. He remembered the lonely nights in his cabin, the endless stretches of quiet fields, and the dreams he had almost abandoned. Now, each day was filled with purpose, connection, and happiness. Ailn had not only become his partner, but the heart of the family they had built together. Her bold declaration of wanting 5 children had set in motion a life richer than he had ever imagined. Every child born to them was a reminder of hope, dreams realized, and the extraordinary power of love. Even in quiet moments, Ethan felt the depth of the life they had created. Sitting on the porch, watching the sun set over the fields while the children played nearby, he felt a peace he had never known. The ranch was alive, not just with animals and crops, but with laughter, love, and the shared efforts of a family. Aeon rested her head on his shoulder, and he could feel the warmth of her hand in his, a constant reminder of the journey they had taken together. The struggles of the past, the lonely years, and the challenges they had faced seemed distant, replaced by the joy of what they had built. The children brought surprises every day, from new skills learned in the garden to playful pranks around the cabin. Each success, each small discovery, was celebrated with laughter and encouragement. Ethan and Aeon worked tirelessly to nurture the curiosity, creativity, and kindness of their children, ensuring that each one felt valued and loved. They created a home filled with rules balanced by freedom, guidance paired with trust, and work accompanied by joy. The ranch had become not just a home, but a foundation for a life full of hope, love, and learning. Ethan and Aeon also found time for themselves, understanding that a strong family required a strong partnership. They walked together in the fields at sunrise, shared meals quietly after the children were asleep, and reminisced about the journey that had brought them together. They celebrated their love, not only through words but through actions, through the shared effort of raising a family, managing the ranch, and building a home full of laughter, learning, and care. As the children grew older, the ranch and home flourished. Leela became a skilled gardener and storyteller, Caleb strong and capable in his father's footsteps, and the younger children full of energy, creativity, and curiosity. Each child reflected the values of their parents, Aeon's wisdom, warmth, and love for heritage, Ethan's patience, dedication, and connection to the land. Together, they had created a life that honored both past and future, blending love, work, and tradition into something enduring and beautiful. In the evenings, Ethan and Aeon often sat together under the stars, reflecting on the extraordinary journey they had taken. They had begun as 2 lonely souls, one longing for connection, the other following her own dreams, and together they had built something remarkable. The ranch, once quiet and solitary, had become a home, alive with love, laughter, and hope. Their family was not just a fulfillment of a dream. It was a living testament to courage, partnership, and the transformative power of love. Ethan sometimes whispered to himself, thinking of the long years he had spent alone. He had not imagined that life could change so dramatically, that love could arrive in such a powerful, enduring form. And yet, here he was, surrounded by the children he had once only dreamed of, with a partner who had changed his life forever. Each day brought new challenges, joys, and surprises, and he embraced them all with gratitude, knowing that his life had finally become what he had once dared only to imagine. And so, the family thrived. The ranch was filled with laughter, the fields alive with play, and the home enriched with love, learning, and tradition. Ethan and Aeon's story had begun with hope and courage, and now it flourished in reality. Their 5 children were the living proof that dreams could come true, that love could transform lives, and that even the quietest, loneliest heart could one day be filled with endless joy. The once lonely cowboy had found his family, his partner, and a life overflowing with love, a life that he knew would continue to grow, flourish, and inspire for generations to come.